Caleb Rourke had spent 7 years learning how to be forgotten, and the salvage moon of Karen's Rest was the perfect place for it. Nothing important came there unless it was broken, abandoned, or too cheap to repair anywhere respectable. The sky was always the color of old ash, the docks smelled of coolant and rusted fuel, and the people minded their own scars because everyone had too many to count. Caleb liked that. He worked alone in Bay 12, sleeves rolled to the elbows, one hand buried inside the torn engine housing of a civilian hauler, while rain tapped against the thin metal roof above him. The ship's owner, a thin trader with 3 nervous eyes and a daughter hiding behind his coat, watched him work as if the engine might explode from embarrassment. "Can you fix it?" the trader asked. Caleb tightened a pressure ring with slow, practiced patience. "I can make it stop screaming. Flying is a separate conversation." The little girl peeked around her father. "Does it hurt the ship?" Caleb looked at her, then at the battered hauler. "Only when people ignore the small noises." The child considered that like it was a serious moral lesson. Maybe it was. Caleb sealed the panel, wiped his hands on a cloth, and stepped back just as the engine coughed once, shuddered, then settled into a rough but living hum. The trader almost cried from relief. "I cannot pay full market." "Nobody comes here because they can pay full market," Caleb said. "Bring me the spare coil you said you had and keep the child away from cracked fuel lines." The trader nodded too many times, then hurried away. Caleb watched the girl wave at him before the bay door shut, and for a second another child's face rose in his memory, pale gold eyes wide with smoke, tiny fingers gripping his burned jacket while he carried her through falling fire. He pushed the memory down before it could finish becoming a voice. On the far side of civilized space, the Oran Dominion was celebrating a lie with polished trumpets and perfect lighting. The anniversary hall of Vyerk's Gate had been dressed in gold banners, victory glass, and long ceremonial flames that burned without smoke, because the court disliked reminders of what the day had actually smelled like. Empress Valora Thane stood on the imperial dais, graceful and unreadable, while thousands of nobles, officers, and broadcast drones watched her honor the official dead. Behind her stood Prince Kale and Princess Leora, no longer the terrified children who had once been dragged from the ruins, but not yet old enough to hide every wound. Kale wore command white and kept his jaw still. Leora wore mourning blue and refused to look at the statue of the Imperial Guard captain whose carved hands held 2 royal children he had not saved. The official speaker lifted his voice. On this day, the loyal sons and daughters of the Dominion held Vyerk's Gate against the Shardborn and preserved the royal line through discipline, sacrifice, and obedience to sacred protocol. Leora's fingers curled at her side. Kale leaned just close enough to whisper without moving his lips. "Do not," she whispered back. "They carved the wrong man in stone." Kale's eyes stayed forward. "I know." At the edge of the dais, Lord Marshal Kyron Voss heard them and did not turn. His face was stern, old, and still proud enough to look like it had never been wrong in its life. He had been the one to recommend Caleb Rourke's banishment after Vyerk's Gate, not execution, not imprisonment, banishment, a tidy punishment for an untidy truth. The lie had been simple enough for an empire to accept. Caleb Rourke, a human evacuation commander attached to a neutral relief unit, had violated royal protocol during the collapse. He had touched the heirs without permission, carried them through a forbidden service route, sealed an Imperial Guard squad behind a blast door, and later claimed someone had leaked the evacuation path to the enemy. The court called him reckless. Kyron called him dangerous. The nobles called him proof that humans had no respect for sacred order. Kale remembered something else. He remembered smoke so thick he could not see his own hands. He remembered Leora choking inside a golden robe too heavy for a child to run in. He remembered Imperial guards arguing over which protocol applied, while the corridor burned around them. Then a human voice cutting through the chaos, rough and calm, saying, "Breathe first. Fear can wait." Caleb had carried Leora on one shoulder and dragged Kale by the collar through a maintenance shaft while the world broke behind them. Later, the Empire had erased him because gratitude would have required shame. Leora leaned toward her brother again. If Mother speaks his name today, I will forgive 7 years of silence. Cale did not answer, because he knew their mother would not. Not here, not with the court watching for weakness. Then the anniversary flames went out, not one by one, all at once. The hall fell into a darkness so complete that even the broadcast drones froze in the air. A low tone rolled through the chamber, old emergency code, older than ceremony, older than lies. The central tactical wall ignited in red. A beacon marker appeared beyond the outer defense grid, moving along a route no enemy should have known. Lord Marshal Chiron stepped forward. Identify. A military analyst's voice cracked over the hall speakers. Emergency beacon from Corridor 9. Vyerk's Gate refugee path. Cale's blood went cold. That route was sealed, the analyst swallowed. It is open, Highness. Something is transmitting through it. The red marker split into 12, then 50, then too many to count. The word appeared across the tactical wall, and every noble in the hall forgot how to breathe. Shardborn. Leora turned to her mother. He warned you. Valora's face did not move, but her hand tightened around the edge of the dais. Chiron whispered, impossible. Cale stepped forward, no longer the child from the fire, but carrying that child inside him like a blade. No, he said, ignored. The hall stared at him. Cale looked at the Empress, then at the false statue, then at the red swarm moving through the escape route Caleb Rourke had warned them about 7 years ago. His voice rang through the anniversary hall with enough force to crack the lie in public. Find Caleb Rourke. The Imperial courier reached Charon's Rest 12 hours after the Shardborn signal crossed the old refugee route, and everyone in Bay 12 knew trouble had arrived before the ship even landed. Nothing that polished belonged on a salvage moon. The shuttle came down through the gray rain with gold oran markings glowing along its hull, too clean, too proud, and too expensive to be anywhere near broken fuel rigs and rusted dock cranes. Caleb Rourke looked up from the hauler engine he was rebuilding, watched the shuttle settle beyond the bay doors, then went back to tightening the pressure mount. The dockhands nearby stopped working. The trader from earlier pulled his daughter behind a cargo crate. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. A tall Oran officer stepped down from the shuttle in formal black armor, followed by 2 escorts carrying sealed message rods. He looked around the bay with visible distaste, then fixed his eyes on Caleb. Caleb Rourke, he said. Caleb did not turn. Depends who is asking. The Oran Dominion. Caleb gave the pressure mount one final twist. Then no. The officer stiffened as if the word had physically struck his uniform. You have not heard the request. You flew Imperial colors to a banished man on a salvage moon during a military emergency. I can guess the shape of it. Caleb closed the engine panel and wiped his hands slowly. If the Dominion wants a mechanic, I bill by the hour. If it wants the man it erased, he is unavailable. The officer's jaw tightened. By order of Empress Valora Thane, you are summoned to assist in the defense of Imperial space. Caleb finally looked at him. He was older than he had been at Vyerk's Gate, broader in the shoulders, leaner in the face, with gray beginning at the temples and eyes that had learned not to waste expression. Summoned, he repeated, not requested, not apologized to, summoned. The officer hesitated. The situation is urgent. Caleb stepped closer and the escorts shifted their hands toward their weapons. He ignored them. 7 years ago, I told your court the Shardborn were using evacuation routes as hunting maps. Your marshal called me unstable. Your nobles called me disrespectful. Your empire banished me for saving children in the wrong corridor. His voice stayed calm, which made it heavier. You did not banish me by accident. You did it because I told you the truth. The officer opened one of the message rods. A projection of Lord Marshal Chiron Voss appeared in the rain-lit bay, stern and pale under emergency lighting. Rourke, the marshal said, the Dominion faces a renewed Shardborn incursion. Your previous observations regarding enemy movement patterns may be relevant. You will be transported to Oran Prime and placed under temporary advisory status. Caleb stared at the image for a long second, then laughed once without humor. Temporary advisory status. That is a beautiful way to say you still do not want to admit I was right. Chiron's projection hardened. This is not the time for old grievances. Caleb's eyes went flat. That is what powerful people always say when their old decisions start killing new people. The projection flickered in the rain. Will you come or not? Caleb turned back to the hauler. No, the officer's eyes widened. You refuse an imperial summons. Caleb picked up his tools. I refused an empire once before. It survived the embarrassment. The courier team stayed for another hour, probably because no one had trained them for failure. Caleb ignored them until the little trader's daughter wandered close again, clutching a cracked coolant cap. Are those bad people? She whispered. Caleb looked at the orange shuttle, then at the child. Not all bad, just very late. She frowned. Late for what? Before Caleb could answer, the officer approached again, this time without the escorts. His expression had changed. Less pride, more discomfort. There is another message, he said. It was not included in the formal summons. Caleb's hand paused over the tool tray. The officer held out a smaller rod, plain silver, no imperial seal. Princess Leora sent it personally. That name moved through Caleb like smoke under a closed door. He did not take the rod at first. The officer lowered his voice. She said you would refuse the court. She asked that this be played only if you did. Caleb took the rod. The projection that appeared was not polished. No throne backdrop. No formal uniform. Princess Leora stood in what looked like a corridor outside the emergency command wing, her mourning blue robes replaced by a simple flight coat. She was older now, but Caleb saw the child from Vyerk's gate immediately in the way she held her shoulders, too straight because fear had once taught her posture. Commander Rourke, she said, and her voice almost held. I know we have no right to ask you for anything. I know what they did. I know they made your name disappear because saying it would have made them admit who really carried us out. She swallowed. The Shardborn are back. Kale is trying to keep the court from panicking. Mother is surrounded by the same people who told her silence was wisdom. Marshal Chiron still looks like he is choking on the truth. A small, painful smile crossed her face. You told me fear could wait. I need you to say it again. The projection trembled as an alarm sounded somewhere behind her. Not for the Empire, for the children in the shelters, for the people running through the routes you warned them about, for whoever is still breathing because you might reach them in time. Her eyes lifted to the recorder. Please come back. When the message ended, the bay was quiet except for rain and the old hauler engine humming behind him. Caleb stood still for a long time. Then he closed his tool kit. The Oran officer straightened. You will come. Caleb looked toward the trader's daughter, then toward the shuttle wearing the colors of the Empire that had thrown him away. Not for the Dominion. He picked up his worn field jacket from the workbench. It still bore faint burn marks from old fire. For them. The officer nodded once, wisely saying nothing. The journey to Oran Prime was silent until the tactical reports arrived. Caleb read them standing in the shuttle's dim troop bay, one hand braced against the wall while Starfield's bent beyond the narrow window. Shardborn signatures were appearing along old civilian corridors, refugee tunnels, medical fallback routes, shelter chains, and royal evacuation paths. Not the strongest walls, the softest promises. Prince Kale met him at the Imperial dock before any minister could speak. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Kale stepped forward and bowed, not like a prince to a tool, but like a survivor to the person who had once refused to let him die. Commander Rourke, Caleb looked at him carefully. You got taller, Kale almost smiled. You got harder to find. Behind him, Lord Marshal Chiron stood rigid, shame and pride fighting across his face. Caleb glanced past them at the red tactical map blooming over the capital. The pattern was already clear. They did not come back to break your border, he said. They came back because you showed them the way home. The Imperial War Council had been built to make the Oran Dominion feel impossible to frighten. Its chamber sat beneath the capital's highest shield tower, ringed by black marble pillars, gold tactical glass, and the carved names of every campaign the Empire had survived. Caleb Rourke stood in the center of that chamber with rain still drying on his field jacket, and knew within 30 seconds that the room was more dangerous than the Shardborn map. The enemy outside studied patterns. The people inside worshipped them. 12 admirals, 5 noble war ministers, 3 intelligence directors, Lord Marshal Chiron Voss, Empress Valora, and the 2 heirs watched as the red tactical display filled with Shardborn movement along old routes that should have been dead. Caleb did not bow low enough for the nobles. He did not ask permission to speak. He looked at the map, then at the men and women pretending the map was not saying what it was saying. "Your outer fleets are useless if you keep them there," he said. One admiral's crest fins flared in insult. "That is an interesting opening from a banished salvage worker." Caleb pointed at the display. "It is also true," Chiron's voice cut across the room. "Explain." He did not sound friendly, but at least he sounded like a soldier for once. Caleb stepped closer to the projection. "The Shardborn are not pushing toward your strongest defenses. They are moving through refugee corridors, abandoned medical lanes, emergency shelter chains, and royal fallback routes. That means they are not trying to break your border first. They are trying to break your confidence in safety." A noble minister scoffed. "The shelter routes are shielded." Caleb looked at him. "They were shielded 7 years ago too." The room went colder. Princess Leora lifted her head slightly. Prince Kael's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Caleb continued. "At Vyark's gate you thought they failed to catch the heirs because your guard delayed them. Wrong. They let one route stay open. They watched who used it, where it led, how your people prioritized evacuees, which doors mattered, which families moved first, which shelters filled fastest. They did not lose that day. They collected your map." An intelligence director leaned forward. "Speculation." Caleb turned to him. "Pattern recognition. From a human relief officer with incomplete battlefield access. From the man inside the fire while your complete battlefield access was busy being wrong." That landed hard. Several nobles erupted at once. "Insolence. This is why he was removed. Your Majesty, this is unacceptable." Empress Valora raised one hand and the room snapped quiet, though not willingly. Her eyes rested on Caleb. "Continue." Caleb nodded once, not grateful, just efficient. "Evacuate the lower civilian shelters near Corridor 9 now. Not later. Now. Move the medical wards out of the old transit spine. Cut power to the royal fallback gates and use manual locks only. Your automated seals are exactly what they are following." Admiral Soreth, commander of inner defense, stood sharply. "Those gates are sacred imperial infrastructure." Caleb stared at him. "So were the children I dragged through a waste duct while sacred infrastructure burned behind us." Chiron stepped forward, anger flashing across his old face. "You will watch your tone in this chamber." Caleb looked at him slowly. "Marshal, I watched my tone for 7 years. It did not save anyone." The silence after that was absolute. Then Leora spoke, her voice steady but full of old fire. "He is right." Every face turned toward her. She walked down from the heirs' platform before anyone could stop her. "You all keep speaking as if Vyark's gate is a painting in a hall. I remember it. I remember the guards arguing while smoke filled my lungs. I remember Caleb Rourke carrying me because my ceremonial robes were too heavy to run in. I remember his hands shaking because he thought he had failed to save enough of us." Her eyes moved from minister to minister. "You banished him for touching royal blood. I remember those hands covered in burns because they were pulling children out of fire. Kael came to stand beside his sister. And he told you the Shardborn left the route open on purpose." Chiron's face darkened with shame or fury, maybe both. The evidence was inconclusive. Kael did not look away. "No." The evidence was humiliating. The words did what Caleb's could not. They came from royal blood, and even the nobles could not pretend they had not heard. Valora closed her eyes for one brief second. When she opened them, she looked at Caleb. "If we follow your recommendations, how much time do we have?" Caleb looked back at the map. New red points were blooming near the southern shelter network. "Less than your council wants and more than your civilians think. Maybe 4 hours before they reach the first fall-safe zone." Soreth snapped. "False safe?" Caleb pointed to the shelter chain. "You built those places to calm panic." The Shardborn built their advance to punish panic. They will let people run there, seal them in, then use them as bait. The council chamber doors opened suddenly, and a young communications officer rushed in without ceremony. His face was pale. "Your Majesty, Inner City Shield Section 12 has gone dark." Caleb did not turn. He had been watching that section for the last 6 minutes. "Medical transit spine." The officer stared at him. "Yes." The room shifted. Valora's hand tightened on the arm of her command chair. Chiron looked at the tactical display as if it had betrayed him personally. Caleb's voice stayed low. "They are early," Soreth whispered. "That shield had triple redundancy." "No," Caleb said. "It had predictable redundancy." The red map flared again. This time an entire civilian district blinked amber. Shelter access compromised. The council finally stopped debating whether the banished human deserved to speak. The enemy had answered for him. Caleb turned toward the Empress. "Give me authority over the lower roots." A dozen officials began objecting at once, but Valora's voice cut through them. "Granted." Chiron looked sharply at her. "Your Majesty." She did not look at him. "7 years ago, I listened to pride and called it order. I will not do so twice." Caleb picked up the nearest command slate. "I need maintenance crews, civilian pilots, anyone who knows service tunnels better than parade roads, and every shelter warden willing to disobey elegant death." Leora stepped closer. "I am coming," Caleb answered immediately. "No, you do not command me." "Correct, I am trying to keep you alive." Kale said, "We can help." Caleb looked at both heirs, and for one moment the smoke of Vyerk's gate stood between them again. "Then help by making them listen." He turned to the doors as alarm spread through the capital. "Because the Shardborn are done studying your empire. Now they are using what they learned." The first inner shield collapsed with a sound like the capital itself had forgotten how to breathe. From the War Council chamber, the nobles saw only tactical icons turning red across the display. But Caleb Rourke heard what those icons meant before the speakers confirmed it. Shelter doors locking, transit spines failing, civilians being told to run toward places the Shardborn had already chosen for them. He moved before the council finished shouting. "Lower roots now," he said, grabbing the command slate and turning toward the exit. Lord Marshal Chiron Voss followed him with 2 guard squads and the stiff anger of a man who hated obeying someone he had once condemned. Prince Kale and Princess Leora tried to follow as well, but Caleb stopped at the door and looked back. "No," Leora's eyes flashed. "You said we could help by making them listen. And now I need you alive enough to keep doing that." Kale stepped closer. "The Shardborn are coming for us." Caleb's face tightened. "Yes, which is why I need you in the inner sanctuary before they reach the roots under it." Leora heard what he did not say. "You think the sanctuary is not safe." "I think nothing they already studied is safe," Caleb answered. "Go, make them lock it manually. No automatic seals." Then he was gone before the court could bury the order under tradition. The lower city was already breaking when Caleb reached it. The medical transit spine had gone dark, leaving thousands trapped between sealed doors and failing lights. Emergency sirens echoed through the gold and black corridors, while civilians pushed toward shelter markings painted by people who had never imagined the enemy might read them too. Caleb's team was not elegant. It was 3 human relief workers from the dock, 6 Oran maintenance crews, Chiron's guards, 2 civilian pilots, and a shelter warden named Vessa who had arrived carrying a crowbar and the expression of someone ready to hit either enemy or bureaucracy. Chiron looked at the group and said, "This is your defense force." Caleb kept walking. "This is the part of your empire that knows how doors actually open." Vessa snorted. "First sensible thing I have heard from command all day." Chiron bristled, but a scream cut through the corridor before Pride could answer. The Shardborn came through the reflection wall. Not the door, not the ceiling, the wall. Its polished surface rippled like dark water, and then black segmented bodies unfolded from it, all sharp limbs, glassy armor and faces that did not hold expressions because they did not need them. They had learned the capital's reflective shield material and used it as a wound. The first one took an Imperial guard through the chest before anyone fully understood the breach. Caleb fired twice, not at the creature's center, but at the joint behind its forward plate. The Shardborn collapsed sideways, shrieking in a frequency that made the civilians clutch their ears. "Aim for hinge points," Caleb shouted. "Do not shoot the face, it is bait." Chiron stared for half a heartbeat, then repeated louder, "Hinge points." His guards adjusted, and the second volley actually slowed the creatures. Caleb was already moving past them toward the trapped transit spine. "We do not hold here, we move people." They found the first shelter sealed from the outside. Behind the thick glass, civilians were pounding on the door while smoke gathered near the ceiling. A system voice calmly repeated, "Remain inside. Safety protocol active." Vessa slammed her crowbar against the frame. "Safety protocol is cooking them." Caleb dropped to one knee at the control box. "Shardborn override loop." Chiron looked over his shoulder. "Can you break it?" "No time." Caleb pointed at the maintenance crew. "Cut power to the door. Pilots pry line." "Guards cover the wall." Chiron snapped. "You will expose them to the corridor." Caleb looked at him. "They are already dying in there." That silenced him. The crew cut the power. The door screamed open 3 handspans, then 6, then enough for people to crawl through. Caleb pulled the first child out himself and shoved him toward a pilot. "Run left. No shelter signs. Follow the people with tools." The mother behind him grabbed Caleb's sleeve. "Where is safe?" Caleb looked down the corridor where another reflection wall was beginning to ripple. "Wherever we make it." The next hour became a moving collapse. Caleb refused every clean route because clean routes were exactly what the Shardborn expected. He took civilians through wastewater inspection tunnels, supply lifts, kitchen freight shafts, and one old ceremonial drainage path that made Chiron whisper, "This runs under the Imperial Chapel." Caleb replied, "Good. Nobody will expect your empire to survive by crawling under its pride." Chiron did not answer, but after that he stopped arguing when Caleb chose ugly doors. Twice the Shardborn tried to herd them toward marked exits. Twice Caleb sent decoy heat packs ahead instead. And twice the enemy swarmed empty corridors while civilians slipped behind service walls. Chiron watched an old maintenance worker carry 3 children through a pipe access while his own elite guards held the rear with shaking hands. He watched Caleb stop for strangers again and again, even when it cost time, even when the route grew more dangerous. Finally, while they dragged wounded civilians through a collapsing shield passage, Chiron said, "You did this at Vyerk's gate." Caleb did not look at him. "I tried. You saved the heirs. I saved who I reached." Chiron's voice lowered. "And we punished you for making us look cowardly." Caleb's answer was flat. "No, Marshal. You punished me because I told you it could happen again." The emergency channel suddenly cracked with Kale's voice. "Rourke, inner sanctuary manual locks are failing. We cut automation, but something is opening the lower gates." Caleb stopped so fast Chiron nearly hit him. Leora's voice followed, tight but controlled. "We hear them in the walls." Caleb looked at the route map, then at the red lines blooming under the palace. The Shardborn had let him save civilians because the royal path had always been their deeper target. "How many with you?" Caleb asked. Kale answered, 30 civilians, 12 guards, us." A distant impact shook the channel. Leora whispered, "Caleb." He heard the child from 7 years ago inside the young woman's voice. Fear could wait, but it had not left. Caleb turned to Chiron. "Sanctuary lower access." Chiron pointed toward a sealed stairwell. "This way." They ran. Behind them, civilians kept moving through the ugly safe routes Caleb had opened. Ahead of them, the inner sanctuary lights flickered red as Shardborn shapes gathered around the royal doors. Caleb reached the final corner, saw the enemy surrounding the heirs again, and felt 7 years collapse into one breath. "Breathe first," he said, raising his rifle. "Fear can wait." The inner sanctuary of Orin Prime had been built for emperors who believed stone, gold, and bloodline could frighten death away. Its walls were layered with old shield glass, its doors were carved from black imperial alloy, and its ceiling carried the painted history of every ruler who had survived long enough to become a lesson. None of that mattered now. The lower gates were half open, the automatic seals had failed, and Shardborn bodies moved beyond the threshold like pieces of broken night learning how to breathe. Inside the sanctuary, 30 civilians huddled behind overturned ceremonial benches, while 12 royal guards formed a shaking defensive line around Prince Kael and Princess Leora. Caleb Rourke reached the final corridor with Lord Marshal Chiron and the mixed rescue team at his back, and for 1 second the years folded over each other. He saw Leora as a child again, coughing inside a robe too heavy for smoke. He saw Kael's small hands gripping his jacket. He saw Imperial guards screaming about protocol while fire crawled along the walls. Then the present returned, louder and uglier. A Shardborn leapt toward the sanctuary door. Caleb shot its knee hinge midair, dropped it into the threshold and shouted, "Manual brace, left side. Do not let that door open clean." Chiron's guards moved without waiting for permission, slamming metal beams into the gate tracks while Vesa and the maintenance crews dragged civilians farther from the exposed entrance. Leora saw Caleb through the smoke and stood too quickly. "You came." Caleb fired twice more, forcing another Shardborn back into the corridor. "You called." Kael moved beside him, holding a short ceremonial blade that looked expensive and completely useless against what was coming. Caleb glanced at it. "That is decorative." Kael looked down at the blade. "It was all they would give me." Caleb pulled a utility pistol from his belt and shoved it into Kael's hand. "Then stop decorating." For the first time that day, Leora almost smiled, but the expression died when a voice rolled through the sanctuary speakers. It was not Orin. It was translated from Shardborn's signal, smooth and empty. "Royal heirs detected. Transfer heirs beyond the gate. Civilians remain unprocessed." A noble minister hiding near the back lifted his head. "They are offering terms." Caleb did not even look at him. "No. They are offering bait." The minister crawled closer, pale and sweating. "Commander Rourke, if surrendering the heirs saves the civilians." Leora turned on him with pure disbelief. "You would hand us over." "Highness, the survival of many may require the sacrifice of few." Caleb stepped between them and his voice dropped into something colder than anger. "That is how they win. They make you choose who stops being worth saving." The sanctuary went silent except for the pounding at the gate. He pointed toward the civilians. "Today it is the heirs. Tomorrow it is the wounded. Then the children. Then anyone too slow to run. That math never ends. It just keeps asking for smaller funerals." Chiron looked at him then, really looked, and something in the old marshal's face shifted. Caleb was not defending the throne. He was defending the rule that no one inside the room became currency. The Shardborn struck again, harder this time. The braced gate buckled inward by a full handspan. Caleb snapped orders in a voice that cut through panic cleanly. "Vesa, kill the east lights. Maintenance crew, vent steam into the front corridor. Guards, hinge points only. Kael, take 3 shooters and watch the ceiling glass. Leora, keep the civilians counting out loud." Leora blinked. "Counting? Panic hates rhythm. Give them 1. She moved at once, kneeling beside a group of children and starting softly, 1 breath, 2 breath, 3 breath. The civilians copied her, quiet at first then steadier. Caleb dragged 2 heat canisters from a storage alcove and tossed them toward the side corridor. The Shardborn followed the false warmth instantly, swarming the wrong passage just as Vesa opened the steam vent. White vapor swallowed them. The guards fired into hinge points and black bodies collapsed against the floor. For 5 minutes, the sanctuary became a machine built from fear, scraps, and Caleb's refusal to let anyone freeze. Chiron fought beside him, old but skilled, taking commands he once would have called insults. A Shardborn broke through a side panel and lunged toward a cluster of civilians. Chiron intercepted it with his own body, drove a shock spear into its joint, and was thrown hard against the wall. Caleb pulled him back before the creature could strike again. "You still with me, Marshal?" Chiron coughed, blue blood at the corner of his mouth. "Unfortunately." "Good, I need the rear fire doors sealed." Chiron stared toward the rear of the sanctuary. "Those doors seal the Imperial escape path." "Exactly. If we close them, we trap ourselves." Caleb met his eyes. If we leave them open, they learn the path. The marshal's expression tightened as he understood. Vyerk's gate all over again. An open escape route deliberately left for frightened people to use. This time, Chiron did not argue. Seal the rear doors, he ordered into his command band. A subordinate hesitated. Marshal, Imperial Protocol says, Chiron roared. Protocol banished the man who was right. Seal them. The command band was still live. Every officer in the capital heard it. Chiron knew that. Maybe that was why he kept speaking. His voice became rougher but stronger. All units, this is Lord Marshal Chiron Voss. 7 years ago at Vyerk's gate, Caleb Rourke saved Prince Kael and Princess Leora. The official record was false. The royal guard failed. I failed. We banished him to protect imperial pride, and today that pride opened the road for the enemy. The sanctuary froze around his words. Even the nobles at the back stopped breathing loudly. Caleb looked at him, stunned despite himself. Chiron did not look away from the gate. From this moment, Lower Route Command recognizes Caleb Rourke's authority. Follow his orders if you want civilians alive. The transmission ended in static. Leora's eyes filled, but she kept counting with the children. Kael stood beside Caleb, pistol steady now. They heard him, he said. Caleb watched the Shardborn pull back from the damaged gate, regrouping with terrible patience. Good, he answered. Now they will know where to come. Kael swallowed. Can we hold? Caleb checked the steam pressure, the barricade, the tired guards, the civilians, the heirs, and the enemy shifting in the dark beyond the door. Long enough, he said. Leora looked up from the children. Long enough for what? Caleb's eyes moved to the tactical pulse flickering under the floor, the hidden rhythm behind every Shardborn movement. For them to show me who is giving the orders. The Shardborn pulled back from the sanctuary gate, and for one terrible minute that felt worse than an attack. Caleb Rourke knew predators did not retreat from weakness. They retreated when the prey had stepped exactly where they wanted it. He crouched near the cracked floor panel, where the tactical pulse kept flickering beneath the sanctuary tiles. One hand pressed against the stone, feeling the rhythm of the enemy through the old evacuation network. It was not random. Every Shardborn movement outside the door answered the same hidden beat, a living signal passing through the service routes they had mapped 7 years ago. Kael knelt beside him, pistol tight in his grip. What is it? Caleb looked toward the rear corridor Chiron had sealed minutes earlier. Command signal, not from outside the capital, from under it. Leora stopped counting with the civilians and looked up. Under the sanctuary, under the evacuation network, Caleb said. They did not just follow the routes, they planted something inside them. Chiron, still breathing hard from the fight, stared at the floor as if old shame had become physical. A signal core, Caleb nodded. Living relay. They hide it inside the path everyone runs toward, then use our own emergency network to guide the attack. Vesa tightened her grip on the crowbar. Can we kill it? Caleb stood. We have to. If we only hold this room, they keep learning. If we break the core, the swarm loses its map. The noble minister who had suggested surrender before now looked horrified. You cannot leave the sanctuary. The heirs are here. Caleb turned to him. That is exactly why I am leaving. Kael stepped forward. I am coming. No, you said we help by making them listen. They are listening now. Leora moved beside her brother. And they came for us because they think we are bait. Let them keep thinking it while you reach the core. Caleb looked at both of them, and the argument died in his throat because they were no longer the children he had dragged through smoke. They were still someone's children, yes, but they were also the reason the room had not broken. Chiron understood before Caleb did. Use royal movement signatures as decoy, the marshal said. Make the Shardborn think the heirs are being evacuated through the western line. Kael lifted his chin. We can trigger the old signals from here. Leora's voice was steady. And stay behind the manual doors. Caleb hated it because it was dangerous. He accepted it because it was smart. No hero moves, he said. You stay inside the inner brace. If the door fails, you fall back with the civilians. Leora met his eyes. Breathe first. Caleb's face softened for half a second. Fear can wait. They moved through the maintenance artery beneath the sanctuary with 12 people the Empire would once have ignored. Vesa led with her crowbar and a shelter map burned into memory. 2 civilian pilots carried heat decoys. 3 maintenance workers knew which old valves still opened by hand. Chiron came wounded but walking, no longer arguing about whether a corridor was too low for imperial dignity. Caleb led them into the dark where the walls sweated cold water, and the signal pulse grew stronger with every step. Behind them, Kale and Leora activated false royal evacuation markers through 3 empty routes. The Shardborn took the bait. Above, the sanctuary shook as the swarm changed direction. Below, Caleb felt the living core answer, hungry and certain. "There," he whispered. Ahead, the tunnel opened into an old refugee junction, a circular chamber filled with abandoned stretchers, dead root signs, and a black crystalline mass grown around the central guidance pillar. It pulsed with red light. Shardborn shapes clung to the walls around it, still as knives waiting for permission. "Do not shoot the core yet," Caleb said. One pilot froze. "Why not?" "Because it wants pain signals. It will call everything here." Chiron looked at the chamber. "Then how?" Caleb pointed to the maintenance crew. "Cut the old guidance lines first. Blind it. Vesa, jam the west gate so nothing comes behind us. Pilots, heat decoys into the upper vents. Marshal, when it screams, hit anything with joints." Chiron gave one sharp nod. "And you?" Caleb pulled a cracked manual charge from his field pack. "I get close enough to make it regret using emergency infrastructure." Vesa muttered, "Humans make very unsettling plans." Caleb stepped into the chamber. "Only when we are rushed." The first guidance line snapped and the core shuddered. The second line went dark and every Shardborn on the wall unfolded at once. The chamber became violence, close and brutal. Chiron's guards fired into hinge points. Vesa crushed a creature's leg joint with her crowbar and shouted something deeply impolite. A maintenance worker died sealing the east conduit with his own body against the lever. And Caleb saw it, filed it, carried it because someone had to remember. He reached the core through sparks and shrieking signal noise, slammed the charge into the gap between crystal and pillar, and felt a Shardborn blade punch through his side armor before Chiron tore the creature off him. "Rurk, arm it," Caleb gasped. "My hands are busy bleeding." Chiron stared at him for one impossible second, then armed the charge himself. They ran as the core began screaming through every speaker in the evacuation network. Above them, the Shardborn attacking the sanctuary faltered. Leora heard it and whispered, "He found it." Kale tightened his grip on the door brace. "He always does." The blast did not roar. It swallowed sound. Red light collapsed inward, then burst through the old junction in a wave that threw Caleb and Chiron into the tunnel wall. Across the capital, Shardborn bodies staggered, lost coordination, and turned from hunters into confused animals. Imperial forces, maintenance crews, civilian pilots, and shelter wardens struck together. Not cleanly, not beautifully, but together. By dawn, the swarm was broken, the inner city still stood, and the emergency routes Caleb had opened were full of living people instead of graves. The public address came at sunrise. Empress Valora stood in the damaged anniversary hall before the false statue, with Kale and Leora beside her, and Caleb Rourke seated nearby because the medics had threatened to sedate him if he tried standing. Chiron stood behind him, bandaged and silent. The Empress faced the Empire and said, 7 years ago, Caleb Rourke saved my children at Vyark's gate. We erased his name because it shamed us. Today, we speak it because it saved us." The hall held its breath. The official record was a lie. His banishment was our failure. His return was our survival. Leora walked to Caleb then, ignoring every camera, and took his burned hand carefully. "You came back," she said. Caleb looked at the heirs, the civilians, the ruined hall, and the empire that had finally run out of pride. "You called," he answered. The empire had banished the human who saved its heirs because pride could not bear the truth. But when the real enemy returned, pride did not hold the line. The banished man did.